Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to another tutorial on mixing and recording rap and hip hop in Pro Tools. I am producer, mixer, and engineer Nicky Battistone, and today I'm going to walk you through creating a sub kick in your Pro Tools sessions without actually having to create any new instruments, adding any new samples, or using any MIDI programming or virtual instruments. This is strictly using only tracks that you have currently in your session, and it will create a beautiful, nice, fat, low, round sub kick, sub bass that will react beautifully in a subwoofer. Okay, so as a mix engineer, I get a lot of sessions from artists and clients all the time that will have a really nice sounding kick drum sample. It hits really nice, it's a great sound, it fits the mix beautifully, but it just doesn't react well with a subwoofer. And that's the case for the session that I'm currently mixing. Great sample, fits the song beautifully, but it just left the low end and the bottom end just feeling empty and hollow. When I switched my monitors over to another set that had a sub, the sub just didn't respond to pretty much anything. It was very flat feeling and just didn't have that hit and that punch and that nice fat bottom end that we've all grown accustomed to loving in our rap and hip hop mixes. So what I did was I created this sub kick to give me that beautiful low end response, but also prevented my mix from getting muddied up or cluttered in the low end. This kick simply only responds in the sub-frequency range. So it's really awesome, and it's a great trick, and as always with most of these effects, you can manipulate them and change them around and play with them and experiment to get a million different variables as far as results go. Now, I do want to mention really quick that this is best achieved when you're working with the full beat in a Pro Tools session. If you have all of your individual instruments laid out on tracks in your session, it's still possible to achieve when you're using just one single stereo 2-track mixdown of a beat. However, it's a lot harder. I will walk everybody through tutorials in the future on how to do this with just a single stereo 2-track beat mixdown. But for now, this tutorial is going to walk you through doing this when you have all of your tracks laid out individually in Pro Tools. Now, if you make your beats yourself and you use software like Fruity Loops or Reason or Logic or any of the other popular production programs out there, you can export all of your instruments individually from those programs into Pro Tools. All you have to do is bounce them all out one at a time. And then import them all as individual tracks. That's not only great for achieving this effect, but generally speaking, you should always mix your rap and hip hop tracks that way. I mean, you should, if you can avoid using just a stereo 2-track mixdown of a beat, then do it. It's always best to mix your vocals as you're mixing the beat, all at once, to be able to blend things together, to pull things out as need be to make room for vocals, or to move things around in aural space as far as panning goes. So it's just the best option to do anyway to get the optimal desired mix. So if you have that option, please do it. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and listen to my original kick drum sample that I have in this session. Like I said, it's a great sounding sample, just doesn't have that low end. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen. Okay, so there you have it. Like I said, great tone, great presence, cool sample, just doesn't have that low end response. So next thing I'm going to do is play for you the sub kick that I created. Now, I am going to have to turn it up a little bit, actually turning up to the point that it pretty much has a little bit of clip and distortion to it, just because the way that I designed my sub kick is only to react in the sub frequency range. So if you're listening to it on earbuds or laptop speakers or other small speakers that don't have a great bass response, it's going to be kind of hard for you to hear this. And that's actually what I wanted, because I didn't want it to muddy up the mix in the low frequency range when you're listening to it on smaller speakers without that bass response, but when you're listening to it on something with a subwoofer, I wanted it to really hit. So I'm turning it up quite a bit just so you can hear it now, but know that it does not sound this gainy and distorted when you create it. Okay, so here we go. Here it is mixed in with the original kick drum. Now I'll go ahead and play for you the sub kick by itself. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit so hopefully it doesn't clip as much. Okay, there you have it. So that's what we're going to be creating today. And you'll see as we go, you can create this sub kick at literally any frequency you want. And this effect is also cool on creating, tones and sounds in your mix that aren't a sub kick. But it's the same rules and principles apply. So we'll go ahead and walk through getting this started. Like I said, no new instruments, no VIs, no new samples, nothing like that. All we need to do is create one stereo aux input, which is going to house our effects and all of our dynamics processing. Okay, so the first thing to do is let's go ahead and create that new stereo aux input. So I just went ahead and selected my original kick sample here. So when I add my new track, it'll fall in place here right underneath of the original kick. So let's go up to track, select new, and the new tracks menu will open. Now we're going to create one new stereo aux input. Go ahead and click create, and there we go. If anybody's watched any of my previous tutorials, you know that I'm very big on making sure all of my sessions are properly labeled and organized. It's just better to get in the practice of doing that. You will be amazed at how much your workflow improves. So let's go ahead and just name this sub really quick, and let's give it a nice independent color so it stands out well in our mix. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and give this, set things up to give this sub kick channel some input. Now we're not going to do this the way that you traditionally do with aux inputs. When you create aux inputs for effect sends, you generally set the input under the I/O menu to a bus and then route all of your effects through that bus to this aux input. That's not how we're going to do it, and I'll show you how and why here in just a moment. So really quick, before we start placing plugs, let's go ahead and solo safe this sub track. If you're working on Mac, just hold down the Apple key and click on the solo button. This will allow the sub track to play, even if you have other instruments or elements in your mix soloed out. Generally speaking, if it's not solo safe and you soloed out, say, the kick drum, the sub kick would not get signal and it would not play in your mix. So solo safing that will prevent that from happening. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a send out from our original kick drum track. This is going to serve as basically the clock or the timing for our new sub kick. This is going to tell the dynamics processors, which we're about to apply, when to let the new sub kick play and when to allow it to play a signal. And since we're going to be blending the sub kick underneath of our original kick, we're going to use the original kick as essentially a clock in which telling the sub kick when to play and when not to play. So it's layered and synced together perfectly. So go ahead to the sends, and let's go ahead down to the bus menu, and go ahead and select a new bus that is currently not being used by anything else in your session. I've used bus 4 in mine already, so if you have any available bus, whether it be bus 1, 2, bus 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, just go ahead and select any available bus that you might have and go ahead and send it out. Now once you do, the send fader window will pop up, and we're going to do two things here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to select to send this to this bus pre-fade. So go ahead and select the blue pre-fade icon right here above the pan controls. And essentially what this says is that even if we mute out the original track in which we're sending from, it will still send signal through this bus if the track is muted. So if this wasn't sent pre-fade, which I'll demonstrate here for you really quick. So let's go ahead and play the original kick. We have the send going. Go ahead and turn it up to line level 0.0. Now if we mute this out and it's not sent pre-fade, you see that the send is no longer sending signal through the bus. But if we stop and we set this pre-fade, we'll start again. See our signal? Now we mute out the kick drum, and look, our bus is still receiving signal through the send. So send this pre-fade to allow us to be able to mute out the original kick drum and just listen to our sub kick when we want to, without having any issues with the bus not receiving a signal from the send. Okay, so like I said, go ahead and turn that up to line level 0.0 to make sure that the bus is receiving the optimal amount of signal. You can just go ahead now and close out this fader window. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a gate on the second insert channel of our new aux input for the sub kick. Now in a moment we're going to be placing a signal generating plugin on the first insert channel, but it's always better when doing this and using signal generating plugins to go ahead and, if you're going to add the gate when you're doing this effect, to place the gate first and then add the signal, so you're not getting this really loud, steady, endless signal playing through as you're trying to work. So it's best to just go ahead and insert the gate first. So go ahead down to the second insert slot on your sub kick track and go to your dynamics plugins and select any expander gate or gate plugin that you have. You can use the Digistock expander gate. I'm a huge fan of all of the Waves plugins. I think they're some of the best plugins in the world, and I religiously use the C1 gate for pretty much everything that I need a gate on. So if you don't have these available to you, go to www.waves.com and download the free, I believe it's a 14-day trial, and play around, and I'm sure you'll fall in love with it like I did. They also have a lot of great sales all the time, so you can get these at a great price. Okay. Now that we've inserted our C1 gate, let's go ahead and just set the gate open and close settings here really quick. So if you're working with the C1 gate, go ahead and just drag these sliders up until the gate open and gate close figures are around -26 dB. It's just kind of a starting point for us. Here we go. Okay. So now that you've set your gate, which is essentially just a threshold, if you're working on another gate like the Digistock expander gate, you'll be essentially just setting your threshold at around -20, -25 dB as a good starting place. Okay, we will be playing with the release and hold and some of the other characteristics here in a little while, but for now let's just go ahead and set the threshold only. Now, while our C1 gate or your other gate plugin is up, we are going to set the most important factor and element of this entire process, and that is setting the keyed input to the gate, which will be seen and done right here. Now, just in a brief overview, what a keyed input allows us to do is it allows us to use the send that we've sent from our kick drum as the input and essentially the clock or master of this gate. So what's going to happen is anytime, once we've set the kick drum as the keyed input here, anytime the kick drum, the original kick drum hits, it opens the gate and allows signal to play. Anytime the kick drum is silent or there's no signal, it closes the gate and does not allow any signal to come through. So this is how we're going to be timing our sub kick with the original kick drum. So let's go ahead and open up the keyed input menu, go down to bus, open your bus menu, and select the bus that we sent out from the original kick drum sample. If you remember correctly, on my system I used bus 4. Since these keyed inputs only work in mono, you can choose either the left or right channel. Always choose the channel in which has the loudest signal if they're not even. If it's even in the left and right, then don't even worry about it, just select the left. So as you see, I selected bus 4L for the left channel of bus 4, which is what we sent out here from our original kick drum. So now we've set the keyed input. So now anytime this original kick drum hits, it will open this gate and allow signal to play. When the kick drum is silent and there's no signal, this gate will close, and no signal will come through. So now this will sync our sub kick with our original kick. But first, we actually have to create a tone to generate the sound of our sub kick, and that's what we're going to do now. So go ahead and close out of your expander or gate plugin here really quick. Now let's go ahead up to the first input or insert path on your sub kick channel. And now we're going to go ahead and insert a signal generating plugin. Now what the signal generator does, and you'll see here, it's under multi-channel, or I'm sorry, multi-mono, other, and signal generator, and this comes stock in Pro Tools. Now what this will do is it will allow you to create a signal of various types. You can set a sine wave, a square, a saw, or a triangle, as well as white and pink noise. Now when you're setting a sine wave, which is what we're going to be doing to create our sub kick, it allows you to set it at any frequency. So you can go from 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz and anywhere in between. So very, very, very cool. As a matter of fact, if I mute out my gate here, I believe we'll start hearing some signal. Yep, here we go. See? So you adjust the frequency to anywhere on the range that you want it. Now for a sub kick, I chose around 54 hertz. Since it's only allowing me to slide to 56, we'll go ahead and we'll just use 56. Anywhere, honestly, between the ranges of, I'd say, 40 to 65 are good places to put a sub kick. Anything lower and it's just really, really too low. I mean, I've seen some cool subtones in the 30s before, but that's really pushing the bottom of the audible frequency range. A lot of sub kick drums are placed in the 50 hertz range, 50, 55, somewhere in between there. So go ahead and set this at 56 hertz, and let's just go ahead and turn up the signal level slider. It defaults at around -20. Let's just go ahead and set it to like -8, -9, just to go ahead and give us a little more signal. Now, first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and just mute our sub track, and let's go ahead and listen to our original kick drum by itself. Okay, now let's go ahead and unmute our new sub track. And now with our signal generating plugin generating a 56 hertz signal, and then our gate, which is keeping this signal muted essentially until this kick drum hits, and then when this original kick drum hits, it will allow that signal from our signal generator to play, and then when the kick drum goes silent, our signal goes silent, our sub will go silent, essentially syncing the two together. So now let's go ahead and take a listen to the two of them together. Turn my track up here a little bit. Now I'll mute out the original kick. Okay, there you have it. We've created a sub kick. Now, some cool things to play with, and this is again all to taste and how you want your sub to sound. You can start playing with the release characteristics of the gate as well as the hold. And the longer you set the release, the longer the sub tone will play before being muted. So it's set at 30 by default. Let's go ahead and take it up to like, well, let's say 100. Now let's listen. See, it's a little bit longer of a note. Each kick drum hit lasts a little longer. Now if you turn it back down to 30, see how it's getting tighter and tighter the lower I go, shorter notes, shorter hits. Now if you set it really long, it'll just kind of play like a long, ominous, sustained bass note. Just a little attack. of gives you these long, sustained bass hits. Let's go ahead and turn this back up to here. We'll take this back down to, let's just say, 40, 35, 40, somewhere in there. So it's not too short. Maybe a little longer. There we go. And there you have it. You've got a sub kick. And like I said, everything, the main thing that makes this happen is setting the keyed input of this gate to a bus send from the original kick drum. Because this original kick drum is essentially working as the clock, telling this gate when to open and when to close, when to allow signal and when not to allow signal. Because without this, the signal generator is just going to play one steady, endless tone. So if I bypass this, you can hear it. Just one steady tone. So this gate breaks up the signal and syncs it and chops it up to line up with our original kick. So there it is. Now a couple other quick things that you can do with your sub kick, just to kind of play around and give it a little bit more definition or dynamics or a little bit more tone or whatever it is you want to do. One cool thing to do is you can add an R bass from Waves. It's the Renaissance bass plugin. It would be under Other if you have it. If you have it, you know where it is. But this will just add some low frequency intensity in whatever frequency range you select. So if we have it set at 56 already, let's go turn this up. You can see we're really driving that frequency. But let's say move it up to like 70. A little bit of a higher frequency low end, so you've got your original signal, your original sub kick hitting at 56 hertz, and then now you've added a little bit of frequency and attack in the 79 hertz range. So you're just kind of giving it a little broader range to work in. Personally, like I said, I like to just keep it at the one frequency set at 56. So that way it reacts with the subwoofer and only the subwoofer. And like I said, when you're listening to it on other speakers, you're not going to really hear it. It's not going to cloud up your mix. It'll be there, but it'll be, way less audible than it would be if you're listening through a system with a sub. Okay, so the last three things that you can do to this. Another really cool effect is if you open up your multi-channel plugins, go to delay, sorry, I can't talk today, and select time adjuster short, and you slide each one of these out to say 92 samples. This will delay the sub kick for about 92 samples, which is just a fraction of a second, but it's just going to create a little bit of distance between the original the original kick drum and the sub kick. So it's going to kind of make for a fatter, bigger hit, and I'll play you both of them together, and then we'll bypass and then unbypass this effect. So here it is on, here it is off. That sub kick just comes in literally a fraction of a second later, which really just kind of adds a little bit more depth and a little bit, essentially a little bit more size to the kick drum. It's the same principle as doubling your vocals. The reason you double your vocals is just for that slight imperfection and delay between performances, which kind of gives you a fatter, fuller sound in your vocals. And that's the same thing that we're doing here. We're just putting a slight variation and slight difference in timing between the original kick drum and the sub kick to allow for a fatter, fuller sound. And people can get crazy with it. I mean, we could take this and drag it all the way out to let's say 300, 200, somewhere in there, which probably is a little ridiculous for what we're doing here, but it really doesn't sound bad. I mean, it's definitely delayed a little bit, but I mean, listening to them bypass, A being it. So it's not terrible. I mean, again, this is all up to experimentation. Do whatever sounds best for your mixes. Play around. That's all I can encourage everybody to do. Okay, so the last two things I'm going to show you is you can start playing around with some additional effects. Say you want to distort this bass, kind of give it a crunchy drive, kind of sound like a dirty, distorted bass guitar. You can insert some sort of distortion effect or guitar amp modeling plugin. Let's say we'll just go ahead and add the SansAmp PSA1. And let's go ahead and turn this down a little bit because it's going to get hot really fast. And let's mute out the original kick. Let's start playing. So there's our original, essentially unprocessed signal. Start turning up the preamp. Maybe some crunch. Little buzz. Take out some of this high end. Pull down the levels a little bit so we're not clipping. You know what? Let's take out some of this crunch. That always seems to be what clips it out. Might have to put a limiter or something on there. But again, you could play around and mix it in with your original kick. So again, it's just all up to what you like. I'm just trying to give everybody a few ideas on some extra cool things that they could do. I mean, the sky's really the limit. Use your plugins and play with them. I mean, that's what everything's here for. You know, mixing is just as creative as the songwriting and production process. You just have to think outside the box and not be afraid to try things. That's really the biggest piece of advice that I could give to anybody. Don't be afraid to try stuff. Lastly, if you want to give it a little bit of compression, that would not be a terrible idea. Again, if you're processing stereo tracks, anytime that you're processing stereo tracks, whether it's a bass drum, an instrument, a string, whatever, always select multi-mono when you're doing compressors, because this emulates how analog consoles and analog compressors and equipment operate. They process the left and right channels separately. So that's, you know, when you're choosing multi-mono plugins, they're affecting the left and right channels independently, as opposed to processing them together under a multi-channel plugin. So it's just another step in kind of recreating the way that analog audio sounds in a digital environment. So, I mean, there's a lot of really cool compressors out there. I mean, it's entirely up to what you like to use. The R compressor is great. You know, just pick a drums preset, and you know, I'm not a big fan of of presets, especially when it comes to drums. But you know, it's a good starting place for a lot of you who don't have a ton of experience mixing, to be able to grab a preset and kind of get rolling and making things sound good. So let's go ahead and just turn this on and play with some compression. Solo it out by muting this original kick drum. You can even, with something like this, use the bass guitar preset. Kind of play around with it a little. A lot of cool stuff for things like this are using some of the analog modeling presets. I love the Kramer Pi. I think it's a phenomenal compressor, especially when you set it on some of these drums presets and start working from there. Maybe set it to limit, give it a little edge. Again, that's all up to what you like. But bypass, you can hear the difference. Turn it up a little bit. It's got a lot more attack now. But anyway, you know, again, that's, you know, all up to you and what you like. But, you know, you started off with just an individual kick drum sample that didn't really have any low end. And now, you know, again, like I said, without adding any instruments, without creating any VIs or any, you know, new samples or anything like that, you've now created a perfect sub kick that fits perfectly within your mix. So again, as always, if you have any questions, suggestions for future tutorials, anything at all, my email is always in the description below, nbattistone@gmail.com. That's nbattistone@gmail.com. I'm always going to have tips and tricks tutorials coming out all the time, and I will have a 10-disc DVD series available in stores later this year, completely dedicated to recording and mixing rap and hip-hop in Pro Tools. So again, I'm producer, mixer, and engineer Nick Battistone, and I thank you guys for checking out yet another cool Pro Tools tutorial. So stay out there making some kick-ass mixes. Take care, everybody.